Welcome to another episode of Lose the Ball Podcast. I'm Ben alongside Ilan.
How you doing, everyone? Happy Buckets. Welcome back to a great episode.
We're actually making a bit of history today. We have our first guest on the show. We have Lior Kozai, freelance writer. He's looking for a job if anyone, has any openings for him. Lior, thank you very much for joining the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Excited to have you.
At this point in the season, we're at the quarter way mark. So we want to see, what's going on? What's everyone's take so far into the season? It's been a crazy season. We've seen a lot of postponements, something that, Ilan and I were kind of surprised about. We thought that the NBA would have been very good with avoiding postponements.
Honestly, I'm if I'm being real here, I think the season's been pretty rough. I don't think the product's been great compared to usual NBA season. I do think the no fans really just impacts the atmosphere of games. And it's kind of it's been tough to watch at times, but there's been some highlights too. I've really enjoyed teams like the Suns and Nuggets, just the last couple of nights playing back-to-back overtime games. So the close games have been really good, but I think we've also seen just a lot of blowouts, some games that get out of hand and then they just keep going and end up with a 50-point margin. We saw the Clippers one time and the Heat lost by 47 to the Bucks. So just some very weird results, but I think as the season goes on, teams will kind of get at least used to the way this is being played, and I think it will get a little bit easier. And then as we get to the playoffs, I think everyone will be a little more focused and teams will kind of give it their all every night, where some games you can just see the teams taking it off right now. But it's been an up and down start, I'd say. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the no fans are really affecting the NBA more than it did in the bubble. I think that there's a big discrepancy. We either see massive blowouts or we'll see really close games. And I think that because there's no fans, the momentum is really all just based on the product of the court, and you can't really have a home stadium and the fans there just swing a game and get a team back in there. I remember last year the Raptors came back from 31 points against the Mavericks, and I think that was mainly because they had fans in their stadium that they can cheer them on and sort of get their energy levels a little bit higher than they would have otherwise. And now without that, if it's a close game, then the players can hear everything. They can feel that intensity. They can feel that they can hear every single word and trash talk that goes on, and they're going to give it their all in those close games. But if the game starts to get out of hand, there's no fans to get them back in the game, and it's more so just the life and the energy of them is getting sucked out over and over again. And that's why I think we're seeing really wide margins when it comes to blowouts or a really close game, and either an overtime or double overtime or whatever it is.
Yeah, and also it just it seems to get boring sometimes, when there's no atmosphere in the arena. We all know Raptors games are probably one of the greatest games to go to in the NBA, but all these kind of fake Tampa fans and the pumped in crowd noise, it's just not the same experience. When you're a fan watching it on TV too.
I want to know why teams are not just pumping in crazy sounds if they can already do it. Why not just pump in insane levels of noise when it comes to free throws for their opponents, or just ridiculous chants and whatnot? If they're gonna have no fans, at least make some fun out of it. Have some fun for the broadcast, for the fans at home, for the players in the stadium. They should try doing all this weird cryptic stuff to sort of throw the other team off, and weird chants or play those funny songs that can really get into the other players' heads. I want them to go all out, and the in-arena noise guys, they have to be better, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I feel like they had more of that. They had more of the fake crowd noise in the bubble, and they just haven't done it the same way. Maybe it's just because the home arenas, the person controlling it at home arenas is not as focused on it as they were in the bubble. I think also for the atmosphere in the bubble, there were other players watching games. We saw DeRozan and Lowry coming to each other's games to support each other, which was pretty cool. And there were and just the players on the bench were kind of making a big deal of it and being the crowd noise, bringing the energy for their team. And the Lakers were, I think, the best at that, where they were really, the bench was hyping them up and really in the regular games, I think they're required to sit in like the chairs 6 feet apart and all that, and like the benches have not been like active like that, and it's also like just for the broadcast view for fans like us, like you can see like all the empty seats. You can see how it's this big arena versus the bubble was kind of they covered up the backdrop and all that, and I think it makes a difference visually, as well as just like I think like especially compared to like just watching football or even like college basketball where they kind of have these smaller arenas. I think you really see like the whole backdrop on the broadcast versus other sports. Sometimes like it's really just focused on the field or the court. And in basketball, like it's impossible not to see this big empty arena behind the court or behind whatever's happening, and it's like a little jarring compared to normal.
So before we move on, the day that this episode gets released is actually going to be the 1 year anniversary of the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant. So we wanted to know, Lior, what's your greatest Kobe Bryant memory that you have? Because I remember, this day is going to really stick out in history. That it's like one of those events that you'll remember where you were when it happened. I remember last year it's the only time that I've actually watched the Pro Bowl because they were giving live information as to like the entire situation. Kobe, probably one of the greatest scorers of our generation, and we just want to know, like, what was your favorite memory of him playing?
It's a good question because obviously Kobe was so special and created so many different memories, and especially against the Raptors, like just all the different times he really torched them and like showed how like not only how awesome a player he is, but how much of like a showman, and really like he's to me he always like embodied the Lakers in that they're not just like a basketball team, they're really like known as like a show. It's like the Showtime Lakers, and they have like the lighting, even the lighting at Staples Center in Lakers games is like almost like a stage where they kind of put them on like the way you would in like a Broadway show, and you can kind of feel that with Kobe. Like the one that comes to mind is when he hit like I think 2 threes to tie it, and then like another three in overtime over I don't know who it was, like I want to say Alan Anderson or something, like just some random Raptors scrubs just torching them. And I think also the All-Star game, the one where he blocked LeBron's shot from behind, and like I always thought LeBron was better than Kobe like as a player, but Kobe was just that competitor, and like even in an All-Star game where it was a close game and Kobe blocking him down the stretch and kind of winning the game for his team was pretty cool. And those two going head to head. So I think just like the way he was such a showman and like really brought like a different element to the game, even if he wasn't the best player on the court at all times, especially toward the end, he was still like must see TV, especially like even his final game, like just being always something memorable. So like I know that's a long winded answer, but there's too many things to pick one.
Yeah, for the great Kobe Bryant, that everyone's got to have at least a bunch of memories to remember him by. I think that how the NBA honored him by naming the All-Star Game trophy after him was extremely fitting because, for him, every single night any fan could go to watch him felt like an All-Star Game. He always showed up in the All-Star Game, won a few All-Star Game MVPs himself. And as we said, he'd always go at it, even in his later years, going against LeBron in the All-Star Game. He'd always put on a show. So I think it was a very fitting tribute to him, very fitting way to honor his legacy. For me, I think the number one memory that stands out was his final game, that swan song, putting up 60 against the Jazz. The Jazz sort of realized that their season was over. They were officially eliminated, I think, hours before that game. And so I think that he also just went out there. He knew that it was something memorable, that everyone was tuning into this game. And I think that they're going against the Warriors in a Warriors Spurs game or something like that, and the Spurs were trying to set a record for the most biggest win record at home. The Warriors were trying to get that 73 win game a season, and instead people were tuning into a meaningless game. It didn't affect the playoffs at all, but Kobe Bryant was dropping 60 points, and people would rather watch that than the Warriors make history because everyone knew that Kobe would make history in his own way. So I think that was a very fitting memory for me. Also, just the fact that he was, outshining the two of the greatest teams in the recent history, with him individually putting on a great game in an otherwise meaningless game.
Yeah, no, I think for me, I posted this on Twitter the other day, but by far it had to be the 81-point game. And that was a game that I never even saw in person. This was a West Coast game, being 3 hours ahead of LA. I woke up in the morning and my dad's like, yeah, Kobe Bryant dropped 81 points on the Raptors. And like, as a 6-year-old kid, you don't really understand like 81 points. Like, you don't understand like how crazy that is. Like, as you get older, you watch the footage of the game and then you realize like wow, like this was such a significant event in like modern NBA history. So that's got to be, the game that really stood out to me and really showed that Kobe is a true baller. So.
Lior, do you think anyone's going to break that 81-point record? I know it's not a record. I know Wilt Chamberlain dropped 100.
Yeah.
100 seems out of sight right now. 81's that next benchmark that has to be passed. I know Booker dropped 70 points a few seasons back. Will anyone pass that 81 mark?
Wilt records don't count. Wilt is just his own category. I think it will happen at some point because, yeah, like you said with the Booker scoring, like that was. I mean, he wasn't really that close because he really scored all the way down to the end and they were fouling and everything. But I think even like Clay scored 60 points. I think he only played 29 minutes. And I think with threes now, how many threes players are taking, like there's just an insane amount of scoring and of like stats in general are up like across the board. So I think at some point someone will get hot and just have like, if you shoot like 15 of 23s or something, and just need to carry their team and just keep pouring it on. But I don't know who that will be or if it will even be anytime soon. I do think it will be at some point. But yeah, I mean, the remarkable thing for Kobe is that like he wasn't that great a three-point shooter or anything. I don't remember how many threes he had in the game, but it wasn't an impossible amount. I think it was maybe like 8 to 10, so it wasn't like an insane amount of threes. He was scoring in just every single way, and that's kind of what made him like incredible that he could score from every spot on the court, and it didn't matter double teams, it didn't matter like how good the one-on-one defense was. Like he would score tough shots, and I think we have like some players now who will maybe get close to it, but yeah, it's hard to see at least for a few years. But I think someone will come and do it eventually.
You heard it here first on Losers Ball Pod. Kobe Bryant's 81 points will be broken.
We're gonna have to clip it. We're gonna have to clip this, and when it happens, we'll say Lior called it from however many years ago or days ago.
It's gonna be someone who's not even born yet, and like I'll still take credit. LeBron James Jr.
All right, Lior, we're getting into the quarter-way mark of the season, and so we figured let's do a little bit of a quarterly recap with you, see where where you're standing on different players. Who do you think has been standing out? Which teams have been standing out and been disappointing? So, which players have so far been the biggest surprises to you?
Yeah, I was trying to figure this out the other day, and honestly, like a lot of different teams have been surprising in good and bad ways. I would say the Jazz right now. I think we just like Utah's just such a like it's one of those teams that just is the same every year or similar every year, so we don't really talk about them. Like we don't really think about them coming into the season, and they've been a lot better than I expected. I think Conley has had a bounce back, and now they've won 8 in a row. They're 12-4, so right near the top of the West. And the Pacers are kind of the Eastern Conference version of this, where they got a new coach in Bjorken, Nick Nurse's protege, and they've done pretty well. Like their offense improved a lot. They're 9-6. And then also in the East, the Knicks and Cavs, like I just thought those teams would be near the bottom from the start, and kind of the usual for those teams the last couple of years. And they've been like pretty competitive. The Knicks, I think, are 1 game under 500. The Cavs are 1 game over, and the Cavs just beat the Nets like twice in a row, like with Harden, with KD in the lineup. So, I mean, obviously extremely impressive. And their defense has been, I think by defensive rating, like Cleveland's second and New York's third. So like just really surprising to me, but like credit to those teams. I think like a lot of their players have just improved in ways I didn't expect, like Julius Randle, Sexton for the Cavs. So yeah, just a lot of surprising teams overachieving so far. I don't know if they can keep it up, but just still like a really pretty significant amount of games at this point, like 15 to 18 games. So good for those teams. What do you guys think?
Yeah, just to put in perspective, I'm pretty sure the Lakers have the number one defensive rating in the league. So it goes Lakers, Cavs, and Knicks. So I wouldn't have expected that beginning of the season. It's definitely surprising to me. But two out of the four teams that you mentioned, the Jazz and the Cavs, both have fans in the stadium. So maybe it has something to do with it. Maybe with that extra bit of energy. We were talking about it earlier. It could be a factor. I'm not saying that's the reason that the Cavs are doing this well, and that's the reason that the Jazz have won 8 straight. I'm saying it may be a factor. It might help them a little bit with that momentum as we were talking about earlier.
I mean, beginning of the season when we were making our predictions, both Ilan and I had the Cavs and the Knicks somewhere very close to the bottom. So we're not looking too good right now.
I don't think that was like an uncommon prediction at all. Like I don't think anyone, especially the Cavs, defensively, because the Knicks, like you could, I guess, talk yourself into like, oh, Thibodeau like was known for defense, but I mean personally, I thought like Thibodeau kind of, especially Minnesota, had kind of lost it to some extent, like just what he was in the early 2010s. I just thought he wasn't, I guess, keeping up with like the modern game at this point, and it had kind of passed it by. Like his defensive principles, like particularly like on pick and rolls, like forcing the ball handler to the sideline, that was kind of broken, and teams were just like getting past that at this point because ball handlers are too good and there's too much talent, like the Stephs and the Hardens of the world. And that Knicks team is just way better than I expected. But then the Cavs were like a historically bad defense the last couple of years and just one of the worst teams in the league went on both ends. And they just completely transformed, and it really came out of nowhere. But I think like this weird team that they have, where they have like all these big men, and kind of Larry Nance was playing small forward, and just all these things that you would think, how does this work in the NBA right now? And it's actually working pretty well. So I think like I don't think there's any I don't think it's bad that you thought that they would be bad, because I think pretty much everyone didn't see this coming. So credit to those teams for overachieving.
Yeah, I think Ilan, you're on the bandwagon. You're wearing a Cavs jersey today.
Got to rep Colin Sexton. He's been doing well for my fantasy team this year. Colin Sexton's definitely taken a step forward. He's definitely been a key reason why that team is doing well. The whole Sexland backcourt, they've really been helping out. Kevin Love's been injured for a big chunk of the season, and they're still performing extremely well. It could be that's helping their defensive rating, because he's not necessarily the best defensive player, but they definitely are a surprising team. What about disappointing teams or disappointing players? What stood out to you as something that you expected a little bit more from, and they haven't really shown up to the season like we were expecting?
So another really a bunch of teams as well. I'd say like the Heat kind of get a pass from me. They're 6-9 right now after just losing to Brooklyn last night. But like if you look through the games, they've been missing Jimmy Butler for a bunch, Hero and Avery Bradley for a bunch of those. I think Bam might have missed one. Like they've just had a bunch of injuries, and also like COVID. I don't think they had a COVID case, but they just had COVID protocols. The NBA let them play against the Wizards, which was dumb because every team that played against the Wizards suddenly had to quarantine some players. So like coincidence there. But yeah, like Miami, I'll give them a pass. And they also had a short off season. Like they're not the Lakers where they just have so much talent to overcome that. So I'll give them a pass. But I'd say the Raptors, as you guys know, like obviously got off to a slow start. And then I'd say Denver and Dallas, I just expected a little more of them. Denver now with a couple of wins over the Suns got to 9-7. But still, like, I just thought they'd come kind of firing out of the gate after like a really awesome performance in the playoffs, and they've been like a little bit slow to start. And then Dallas, just in general, like Dallas's offense was the greatest like regular season offense ever, basically, in terms of offensive efficiency last year, and now they're 17th in the league. So I don't know. Luka was a little bit out of shape to start the season, and Porzingis was hurt, but just in general, I think like trading Curry might have had a little bit, Seth Curry might have had a little bit more impact than I.
Yeah, no, I don't think
they-
I don't think we were confused as to which one.
yeah, I think it had a little more impact than I anticipated. Just losing that like secondary shooter, ball handler, creator of shots. And they thought like, well, we need defense. We'll go for Josh Richardson. But I think their offense has actually fallen off way more than I anticipated. So just those teams, I think like I don't know. I'm not too concerned about any of those four, but I just think I thought they might come out of the gate like just blazing, especially the Mavs and Nuggets who finished the season really strong. I thought they'd be near the top of the West, and I think they might have to temper expectations a little bit, and Dallas will be in that like 5-6 range. Denver can still get up to like the top four, but yeah, like just not quite as good as I thought. And yeah, what do you guys think of those?
Yeah, those teams have all been disappointing. I think though that they're all on an upward trajectory. I think that they're picking up a little bit of the slack as the season progresses. So I'm not too concerned for any of them. I think they'll all be playoff teams. They had slow starts, but it's a weird season. There's a lot of these weird games, more back-to-backs than usual. More these playoff series have been making it a little bit easier for teams to adjust and strategize against teams. But I think that for me, one of the biggest disappointments has actually been a player, Ben Simmons. The Sixers have been fantastic. They've been like the best team in the East. Embiid has looked like an MVP candidate, and so I think that I was really expecting Simmons to come out of the gate out of the season just really dominating. If we look at the rest of his draft class, there was Jaylen Brown, Brandon Ingram, who are all towards the top of that class, and they've all taken massive leaps ahead. Brandon Ingram can legitimately seem like a guy who can carry an offense for a team. Even though the Pelicans may not be playing so well, he, as a player, has been fantastic. Took another step up after his All-Star season last year. And Jaylen Brown has been on another level. His defense is incredible. He's been dropping games with like over 40 points. And so I think that those guys have been taking steps forward, and he's sort of been stagnant. And, everyone blames his whole 3-point shot that he won't take a shot, and, that's an issue. I think that if people started viewing him as more of a power forward, they would more or less like a point forward. I think that people wouldn't be so uptight about his 3-point shooting. I think that there's other flaws in the game. He seems to have times where he'll sort of just seem like he's disappearing on offense. It's really those half court sets where he can't do much. When in transition he's fantastic, but he can't do much when they have to have his set offense. And so I was expecting him to really come out of the gate. Him and Embiid with a new coach and they had shooters all around him now. They brought in Seth Curry. I thought he was going to be really good, and he's been a little inconsistent. He's had games where he's extremely dominant. He's had games where you can sort of forget he's out there. And so I picked the Sixers to come out of the East. I picked them to make it to the finals. I still think that's going to happen. The early results for them have been fantastic as a team. I was just expecting a little bit more from Ben Simmons.
Yeah, no, I think for me, biggest disappointment, obviously coming from a bit of a biased perspective, has to be New Orleans. I think coming to this season, bringing in Stan Van Gundy, making those offseason trades, moving on from Drew Holiday, bringing in Steven Adams, bringing in Eric Bledsoe. I think we had a lot of hype for New Orleans. We're hoping that Zion would take that next step, but it just seems like defense is a huge issue for them. They can't close out games. Yesterday, I think they were up by like 12 against Minnesota at the half, and they lost by 10 or so. And it's just getting a bit concerning. Kind of classic Pelicans basketball. Having a bit of a hot streak at the beginning, and then unfortunately cooling off. After your winning streak, they're sitting at 5-10, second last place in the Western Conference, a game ahead of Minnesota. And yeah, this is definitely not where people expected them to be at this point of the season. People honestly thought that they were going to be a playoff team contending. They had the young pieces and the right parts for the season, but at the moment it's not looking too good. And now I'm seeing rumors that they might move on from Lonzo. They're looking at trade options. So they've been pretty disappointing for me so far.
Yeah, I was hoping for more from them as well, because I like their team so much in theory, and then it just something on the court just doesn't work. And I was just looking at their defensive efficiency, like you said, 24th in the league, but they're only 20th in offense too, and it's like they have too much talent to be, I guess, lagging that much. And I guess they do have kind of a lack of spacing, a lack of shooting, and playing Zion, Bledsoe, and Steven Adams all together, but still, they have Ingram and Zion, two really dynamic offensive players, and they should be able to figure out something, at least a top half of the league offense, and it just isn't there right now. And yeah, I don't know. They looked really good to start the season, and they had some kind of impressive wins or impressive performances even in losses, and now they just kind of tailed off. And I don't know if they're going to recover at this point, just because the West is so deep, and it's going to be really tough to kind of have an uphill battle to get that bottom of the West 8 seed kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that when we were discussing the season in the beginning, after the off season, as the season was beginning, we discussed the Pelicans, and I think the term we used was a wonky team, that they had a bunch of players that they look great. I like all the players individually, but I wasn't sure how they would mesh on the court. And they started off the season, I thought, okay, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe they'll be a really good team. And then I think that they sort of fell back into where they belong. Their starting lineup has really no spacing at all. Other than Brandon Ingram, not many players can shoot. Like Steven Adams can't shoot. A Bledsoe Lonzo backcourt is also not good for spacing. And so, especially for a player like Zion, who needs to get to the paint, his percentage in the paint is unbelievable. They have to have more shooters around him, and I think that it's just not there. The defense also for that team is just not there, as you mentioned, Lior. So I think that a lot of good individual pieces, and I can see them, trading a lot of those different pieces to, either get a more coherent roster or get more young assets to build around Ingram or Zion, because it's still a really young team. They can still, build that long term. I think that David Griffin tried to speed up the process, tried to get him to playoffs already, and he didn't realize that the West is such a bloodbath, or he maybe just more miscalculated and thought that he can, put themselves into that bloodbath as well. So I think that they might be able to trade a lot of those different pieces, like Eric Bledsoe, maybe trade Lonzo to Charlotte, fulfill LeVar's dream destiny for all the Ball brothers to be playing in Charlotte. But I think that it's just not looking too good for the Pelicans right now. I apologize, Ben. I know that you're a team. I know you're a big fan of them, but don't expect the championship this year. It's not going to happen.
So, Ilan, funny enough, you mentioned trades, because at this point of the season, Lior, we want to know which teams are buyers and which teams are sellers. Who has to improve the roster to make, be more competitive and make a playoff push comes the end of the season, and whose season is just a write-off right now. We already know, what, just tank for whoever in the draft, start the rebuild process, and start fresh next year.
I guess starting with buyers, I would say for a team that's already in the playoffs, I'd say the Nets, just looking for a center. I don't think what they have right now is a long-term solution in terms of, since the Harden trade, they got rid of Jared Allen, obviously, and they basically have DeAndre Jordan as the main guy, the only real center. And then Jeff Green is basically their backup center. And they brought in some, I think, D-League guy or borderline player, but I just don't think that's going to work for them come playoffs, especially in the East, where you've got Joel Embiid, you've got the Giannis Brook Lopez front court, which is just huge. Durant is a tall guy and he can protect the rim a little bit, but he's not really gonna body up these huge centers. So I think they need just one more big man in there. And then for the kind of more borderline teams, I would say maybe the Rockets, if they're still trying to be competitive and like make the playoffs, they kind of need a center as well. And then the Raptors as well, like really need a center. And kind of the teams that I think kind of have an overload of centers would be like Detroit and Cleveland, just with a bunch of centers. And like everyone was kind of wondering, what are they doing stockpiling all these guys? And I think they could actually get some decent value out of them, because like the Cavs have Drummond in his last year and like JaVale McGee and all these guys, as well as like some younger players in their front court. So I think they could probably that would make a lot of sense for a trade, just a team looking to get like a center for cheap, because there are so many teams that kind of need a big. And I think we saw in the playoffs last year how like even though we always talk about small ball, big men are kind of really still important when it comes to like Bam and Embiid and Jokic and Anthony Davis. Like both conferences, really, you need like a big guy to match up with these guys come playoff time.
It's actually kind of funny that you mentioned Houston as buyers, because I feel like they're going to turn into sellers as we go on in the season. I feel like they're just trying to get as much value as they can. Victor Oladipo, John Wall, maybe even DeMarcus Cousins. I don't know, but I feel like this isn't the type of roster that they want to go with.
Yeah, there's rumors also that PJ Tucker's, they're trying to explore a PJ Tucker trade. Eric Gordon may want out also. So I can see them, sort of just pulling the plug, sort of building around Christian Wood for the future. He's been phenomenal this year. A lot of the stuff you mentioned for the Nets and the Cavs we discussed in our emergency pod about the Harden trade, and I said also the Cavs will probably trade Andre Drummond. He's a easy trade piece. Funny enough, the Nets could use Andre Drummond. Maybe they should have tried to get him in that 4-team trade. Mm-hmm. Could have helped a lot. But yeah, they really haven't been having a center to close out games, and it's been hurting them. They've been trying to run KD at center, and for at certain matchups that can work. But again, there's teams in the East come playoff time who have some dominant centers. The finals will probably have a good big man as well. So I agree with you. The Nets are going to definitely be buying. We said that this is probably not their final move. They probably still have some more moves to make, whether it's buyout guys, whether it's trying to trade at the trade deadline. But I agree with you. They're definitely going to be buying.
Yeah, actually, I agree. Like the Rockets, I don't know. I didn't mean them. I guess like they're not contenders. I just feel like they're kind of stuck right now because they have enough talent to win some games where they're kind of going to be, especially with the NBA having now the play-in tournament to get like the 7 through 10 seeds basically all have a chance at the playoffs. So you could be 10th in the West and still have like a chance to make the playoffs. And I think they're kind of going to be in that range just because they're not trading John Wall. Like he's stuck on that team for the rest of his contract. And then Christian Wood obviously is really talented. I think we'll talk about him later in a most improved discussion. And then I think Oladipo on an expiring contract, he'll probably be around there. So they have enough talent to be competitive, but like you said, like I think, yeah, they are going to look for the Tucker and Gordon trades if teams are looking to get that kind of player. So maybe they're sellers, but like they're still kind of in this range where I think maybe they go younger, but like it could still work out if they find a young player who's effective for them. Another team kind of near Houston in the standings that I want to mention was OKC as sellers, because I think they're definitely, I think going into the season, they thought they were going to be terrible and just be possibly the worst team in the West, and they'd be like a prime tanking candidate, and they've been like a little better than expected. So I could see them trying to trade George Hill, maybe Horford. With all these teams looking for bigs, I think it would make a little more sense than it did last year when he looked so bad in Philly. I think he can still help a team. You don't love his contract, but like in the right fit, if it doesn't cost a lot, I think a lot of teams could look for those two players as veterans to add for a playoff push.
One other team that's been a huge question mark this year that both Ilan and I had really high hopes for is the Washington Wizards. What's your take on them? Do you think they have to move on from Beal, or is it or are they still kind of like one piece away from being a somewhat of a good team again, or is it just time for a rebuild in DC?
And honestly, like it's tough because Beal, like you want to keep the star when he said like I want to be there. Basically, it's like when how often does a star say I want to stay on the bad team right now? Like it's really cool that they drafted a guy and he actually wants to be there. But like I just don't see any path to them being good anytime soon. Like I thought they would be borderline playoffs or like 8 seed this year with kind of the Westbrook Beal backcourt, and they can't defend like even in the slightest. Like they're just so awful defensively, and then they're not like it's not like one of those teams that can have a top 10 offense to kind of make up for the defense and win some like 125 to 120 games. They're just not like great offensively, so it just leaves them in the middle of this big mess, especially with like Wall looking kind of better in Houston than he was like coming back from injury, being pretty decent. Like I think they're really stuck with this. So I'd probably look to trade Beal and just kind of rebuild. And Westbrook's there, but you just kind of have to like live with it at this point. And I think they can build. Like they have some pieces, but I didn't love the contract they gave Bertans, and then maybe someone looks to trade for him, but it's not a great contract. And then you kind of have a couple of young guys, like Hachimura, and they have I'm forgetting his name right now, but they have like Thomas Bryant is like a decent center. They have some younger guys, and I think I think at this point they have to go kind of the OKC route and try to get what they can for Beal. I think he would get a good trade return, like looking at what Drew Holiday got. Beal's a better player than him, and I think they could get something pretty good for him. But yeah, like just go the rebuilding route, because I don't see how they get to even like be a decent playoff team from here.
Yeah, I had them 6 in the East beginning of the season, and I quickly cut my losses with that one, realized it was a lost cause for them. I think that they should trade Beal. His trade value will probably be the highest it'll ever be. He's 27 years old. He's got a long-term contract. He's signed for a few years now, and so now's the time to trade him. He doesn't fit with the trajectory, with the timeline of your team right now. The guy you're forgetting, his name was Denny Avdia. We're big fans of him on this podcast, but I think that two teams I would watch out for trading for Beal could be the Nuggets and Philly. I think that he makes a lot of sense with Jamal Murray in a backcourt there, provides some extra defense there. A nice three-headed monster of Beal, Murray, and Jokic could be dominant in the West and can really give the Lakers a nice run for their money. And maybe for Philly, they do a Ben Simmons for Bradley Beal flip. I think, again, it makes a little bit more sense for the fit in Philly, alongside Joel Embiid. He's clearly the main man in Philly now. It's no longer a just debate on who's going to be the focal point of Philly's offense moving forward, or for the team moving forward. And for Washington, I think that Ben Simmons is a guy you can build around. He makes a little bit more sense for that timeline. And if you build a team really around Ben Simmons, it could be really good. I mentioned earlier that I was a little disappointed in him this season, but if you have a team that's built around him and his strengths and weaknesses, he might be able to give a better showing night in and night out.
I had a question for you guys. What do you think? I was kind of thinking about this the other day, but do you think if the Bucks had gone after Beal with these like 5 first-round picks and just throwing everything at him instead of Drew Holiday, would you be higher or lower on the Bucks right now?
Oh, I'd be extremely higher on the Bucks. I think that Bradley Beal is a bona fide superstar. He's leading the league in scoring right now. He's someone who you can create his own shot, especially late in the game, when oftentimes, especially this season, we've seen Giannis is not so good late in the games, especially in the, if they foul him, he's awful from free throw line this year. I think worse than last year. A lot of teams have been using the Raptor strategy of sort of building a wall around the rim, and it sort of eliminates Giannis's gameplay. So if you have a guy who can score you a bucket at will, I'm not saying that Drew Holiday isn't that guy, but Bradley Beal is 10 times better than him. So I think that it would have made them a lot better. I don't think that Washington would have made that trade, in the offseason. I think that they really thought Beal and Westbrook could work. I think that if they could have, hindsight's 20/20, if they could have got that trade offer now, they probably would have accepted it. but I would have been way higher on the Bucks. Like I don't think that the Bucks are going to make the playoffs. Not the playoffs, my bad. The finals this year. I think that a lot of people who were high on Giannis last year, who voted him for the MVP, are not even considering him for the MVP this year. We can discuss that soon. But I would have been way higher if they would have traded for Bradley Beal.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that Milwaukee might have made a trade a bit too early for everyone's likings. After seeing the Nets trade for Harden, I think Milwaukee maybe they should have waited to make a move for Giannis, but I obviously understand because they wanted to sign, they wanted to lock him up. But I think they overshot that trade. It should have been maybe a bit more patient with bringing another star into Milwaukee.
Yeah, it was a tough spot because if they don't do anything, then you say like, well, why would Giannis stay there if they're going to run it back with this roster that clearly wasn't good enough? But then at the same time, just if you move too early on like a player who's like, I like Drew Holiday a lot, but I just don't think he, like you guys said, like I don't think he moved the needle for them. And yeah, if they had waited a little bit, they might have ended up with someone who kind of covers up those weaknesses you mentioned.
Yeah, I think we have to look at this trade also that they weren't just trading for Drew Holiday, they were also trading for a Giannis extension. So, if you look at it that way, then they won the trade by far. They got Giannis signed the bag with them. He's there for long term. So maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he doesn't sign the extension in the offseason. They go into the offseason a little worried what happens. And, they don't, if he doesn't sign that extension, then they don't trade away their whole future midseason. But I think that if you look at it in that lens, then it makes a lot more sense. Moving on, we're at the quarter mark right now in the season, and we want you to give out your season awards at the quarter mark. Who are your quarter MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved Player, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year? Let's hear it. It can be based off this first quarter of the season. Let's start with the MVP. Who do you have winning the MVP this season?
Just before that, I gotta be honest. I hate when I saw you guys send the outline. I was like, I hate quarter season awards. Like all I had to hear all fall was like Russell Wilson never got an MVP vote, and then they were 5-0, and everyone was talking about it, and then they sucked to end the season and lost.
Yeah. Well, let's just pretend the season ends today, or it's not the quarter season anymore. Season ends today.
It can still be fine. So I think it's worth giving people credit, especially just to start this season. Like we talked about, there's a lot of disappointments. So yeah, let's give credit to whoever is performing. I'd say, I'm leaning toward Embiid. You mentioned earlier how great he's been, and yeah, I mean, it's been the best season of his career so far. Like the stats speak for themselves: 28 points, 11 rebounds. But he's also just one of the most impactful defenders in the league. The team is doing basically right now. You mentioned best in the East at 12-5. Part of the reason I don't like this is because these things are so they can change so fast, and I think if you win MVP, you probably need to be top 3 in your conference. And they're 2 games ahead of the next couple teams. And, this stuff can all change. But yeah, I am pretty high on the Sixers. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them up there. They're 5th in defensive rating. And, they did trade Richardson and Horford and getting they got better fits for their team. But at the same time, they got Seth Curry and they could have weakened their defense, and they didn't. And I think Embiid deserves a lot of credit for that. So being the best scorer and the best defender on one of the best teams in the league, I think deserves a lot of credit. And that is the case for him, really. Jokic, I think, is worth mentioning just as a guy putting up insane stats, leading the league in assists right now. Basically 26 points, 12 rebounds, and almost 10 assists a game. And he's just been unbelievable. But yeah, like you said, if the season ends today, Denver's 5th, or right now, 5th in the West. I think they'll get a little higher, so he could be in the mix for that. But yeah, that's more of an individual thing. And he did get them to be a top 3 offense. So it's not just empty numbers or anything. But yeah, I do weight the team success enough. So right now I have Embiid. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The whole Jokic thing is incredible what he's doing right now. Might be the first time some centers leading the league in assists since like Wilt, and we already said that Wilt numbers are untouchable. I'm not sure. I haven't fact checked that yet, but I'm just making a educated guess right now. I agree. Embiid's definitely a front runner. I think though that the person who's going to take away the award this year is LeBron. I think that there's no really clear front runners right now, and I think he's the best player on the best team. I think that it's pretty accepted that the Lakers are the best team in the league, and I think that the MVP is very narrative driven, and whether that's good or a bad thing, that's just the reality of how it is. And Giannis is not going to win it this year because we've mentioned that he won it the past 2 years. There's definitely voters fatigue there, but also his team just isn't getting that spotlight as it's been getting the past few years. Luka's team hasn't been playing as well. He was, I think, the front runner in betting going into the season, but his team hasn't been playing well enough for him to justify taking home the award. And, I think the only other competition is Embiid or maybe KD, but KD's now got two other, all-star, superstar players on his team. LeBron has Anthony Davis, but AD hasn't been playing so well this season so far, whereas Kyrie and Harden have both been dominant this year, and they've been amazing. So I think it takes away from KD's case when you have a big three alongside you. So I think that what LeBron is doing, they have the best defensive team in the league. AD taking a little bit of a step back since the bubble run and the final run. AD's still incredible, but he definitely is taking a little bit of a step back since last year, whereas LeBron hasn't missed a game yet. He's been going all out. He's putting on a show when they have to put on a show. They had their game on national television against the Bucks, and he went out and was dominant. I think that was his declaration that he's here for the long run. He's here to get that award. I can see him building up that narrative, building up the storyline for him to get it in year 18 or taking home that award. I think LeBron's going to win the MVP.
I don't know. Like, he may win it, but like, if you had to say who deserves the most to win, would you put LeBron up there? Because I don't know. Like, I've seen the case for him, and yeah, I mean, he's playing well. Like, he's LeBron. He's still the best player in the league, but it's not the best player award. And I mean, his stats aren't like spectacular. And I think just their team defense is like, if you had to credit one person, like, you'd give more credit to AD, right? And they have a lot of like good individual defenders. Like, LeBron's trying harder there than he did the past several years in Cleveland. So like, LeBron deserves a lot of credit. I don't know. I don't really see the case for LeBron as like, in terms of just like, does he deserve it or not? Like, he could very well win it because there are a lot of voters who are like, yeah, like you said, narrative based, which I think is kind of dumb. And that's how Westbrook ended up winning an MVP. But like, I don't know. I don't really buy it just in terms of his individual performance. I think they're clearly the best team in the league, like you said. And they got better. They improved their bench with Harold. They improved their starting lineup with Schroeder. And I think that's a credit to their front office, and it's a credit to their coaching and to LeBron as well. But he's not carrying this team. Like, it's just a really good team. And I think if anyone is really elevating their team on, like, as an individual to be like one of the best records in the league, it would be Embiid right now for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Embiid is definitely up there. I think that it's probably right now a 1A, 1B situation. I just think that best player on the best team often can make a case for the MVP. I think that LeBron has been playing less minutes than last year, and he's still putting up great numbers. They're not insane off the charts numbers that you would look at and just be blown away. But when you're playing less minutes and your team is still the best team in the league, yeah, they have better pieces around him, but I think that the way he's engaged, the fact that he hasn't taken off a game yet, where everyone was expecting, I think, them to coast a little bit after the shortened off season, after that championship run, and he hasn't missed games. He has been engaged, and especially late in games, when you're watching games, you can tell that LeBron is not being passive anymore. He's sort of taking the ball and going to make things happen. He's going to take those final shots, whether it works out or not. He's going to put that onus on him, and so I think that when you're that engaged and you're going to be that dominant, and when your team needs you, you'll show up and you'll take those final shots, take over in the fourth quarter, secure the win, and you're the best player on the best team, I think that's enough of a case to win the MVP. I think that, whether he deserves it or not, statistically or not, I think that it's very clear this year that he is the best player in the league. And I think that that's going to secure him the MVP. I know that the MVP isn't necessarily the best player award, but I think he also happens to be the most valuable player award, because I don't think that the Lakers would be the number one seed in the league if he's not there, or if you replace him with someone, a little bit of lesser value than him.
Yeah, I mean, like he has the case. I just think like he is like, to be fair, the team. I think Josh Eberle, who was tweeting the other day, like this was the best his teammates have ever done with him off the floor. I think they have like a plus 1.7 net rating, something like that. Like they're actually a positive with him off the floor. And like you said, like his minutes are down. He's playing 32 minutes a game. So I think the fact that the team can actually win the minutes with him off the floor is huge, because that's why they're so dominant. And like he's been great, so I wouldn't be mad if he won it or anything if the season ended today. But like I just don't think he's carrying them to that extent that it matters all that much that they have the best record, because I don't think it's been like such a strong individual performance. But yeah, I mean, I see the case in everything. I just think a guy like Embiid has been such a big factor in his team winning this many games. And if you took him off that team, like, I don't know if they even make the playoffs, honestly, because I'm really not impressed with their roster, especially depth wise. Like Simmons is great, but he, like you said, he's underperforming. And then there are other guys like Tobias Harris he's okay. He's a good scorer, but their defense, I think, would be horrible without him, and they're a top 5 defense in the league. Whereas you take LeBron off, like the team's not very good, but they'd still be a good defense. So at the very least, like I think just that two-way impact is very good. But like it's a fair conversation for sure, and I think it will change over the course of the season.
So moving along, you were mentioning you were very high on Joel Embiid being the anchor of the Philadelphia 76ers defense. Would you also give him the Defensive Player of the Year award too, or is there another player in the league that's standing out to you so far this year?
I think Embiid or Davis would both be good choices. I mean, from the same logic of the MVP, right? AD's the best defensive player on the best defensive team, so I think he has a great case. But Embiid as well, like being the anchor of that defense that I don't think has that many great defenders anymore. But yeah, either one I think has a good case. What do you guys think?
Wow, Lior's predicting a same MVP Defensive Player of the Year duo award.
I'll give it one caveat, is that I don't think Embiid will actually win either of these awards, because I think, like we've seen every single year, he misses a quarter of the season, and he's not like, his stamina is not that great. Like he is just an injury-prone player. He's like 7'2" and giant. So I don't think he'll play that many games. Like I don't think he'll keep this up the entire season. But I think he's been the best. Like if you just took this quarter, so I don't know how much that means. But yeah, like I just say to this point. But yeah, like I definitely I could see Davis like running away with it, especially like with how good the Lakers have been. Because I think if I had to pick one team that's going to sustain this, like no question, the Lakers and the Sixers, like I think they'll hang around that top 5. I don't know if they'll be that good defensively all year, but we'll see. Yeah. So either one I think would be good choices.
With all these games getting canceled, Philly might not have to worry about playing playing Joel Embiid that often. Maybe the NBA decides to shorten the regular season in favor of Embiid.
Yeah, one other name I want to throw out there is Andre Drummond. We discussed a lot about the Cavs early on, how their defense has been top 3 in the league, they've been dominant, and I think that Drummond's definitely a big piece of that. He's been an anchor for them on defense, and so I think he's made a few statements out this past season that he wants to be recognized for his defense, that he wants to be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, for All-NBA defense, so I would just put him in that conversation as well. But I think that I agree Anthony Davis will probably win the award because they've been that good, and the Lakers have been that good on defense, and he's been that good on defense. But I just wanted to give Andre Drummond a shout out because he really has helped revolutionize the Cavaliers' defense. Lior, do you have Embiid winning Most Improved Player also, taking all 5 awards home? Or
yeah, he's even going to win Coach of the Year too.
He'll be the first player to win Rookie of the Year not in his rookie season.
Well, a bit of a sensitive subject for that team.
MIP, Most improved, I'd say. I mean, it's the two Chris's, right? Christian Wood or Chris Boucher, I think, are both great candidates. Just looking at like Boucher was, I mean, he was basically the third center for the Raptors last year. And he filled in really well, like sometimes. Marc Gasol basically missed half the season, and Boucher was really good as a backup for Ibaka at times. And then when Ibaka missed games as a backup for Gasol, he was good, but he wasn't like a consistent rotation player. And now he's been like, I mean, if you look at all those, even just stuff like TPA and like just those like catch-all stats, he's been like the best player on the Raptors. I wouldn't go that far, but he's been so much better. And like I always used to say, Boucher shot threes like he was a 40% three-point shooter, like he had the confidence of that, but he was a 30% three-point shooter his entire career, and now he's shooting 49%, which is just like absurd. He's almost definitely not gonna keep it up. I think he'll be still like around 40%, which is excellent. Like he's scoring 15 a game. He's been like a huge punch for the Raptors off the bench, and his defense has been really good. And he used to be kind of a little too wild, just jumping at everything to try to block shots. And I think he's been a lot, just a lot more sound and really important to the Raptors, and been like basically their best, like unquestionably their best big man and one of their 4 or 5 best players. And then Christian Wood basically improved his scoring by 10 points a game. He's kind of like the usual type of guy who wins most improved, just improving to over 23 points a game scorer and 11 rebounds a game. And just, he's an all around, like really solid player. And I think he already showed some of that improvement in Detroit last season. The last like month and a half, he was really excellent, but I don't think anyone remembers that because that was in like February, March. And we're basically like, he's been just the best player on the Rockets through 15 or so games. So I think I'd probably give it to Wood at this point. Maybe it changes as the season goes on, but both are great candidates.
One other player I want to throw out there is Jeremy Grant for the Pistons. The Pistons have been god awful, but he's been, one bright point for that team. He took a bet on himself, left the Nuggets to go to a bad team where he can get more of a, bigger role on offense, and he's definitely been making the most of that situation, averaging over 24 points a game, and really doing it all. Everything's going through him, late games as well. He's taking the shots, not scared of the moment. So although the Pistons aren't good, Jeremy Grant has been really good, so I'd throw him in the conversation as well. I don't think he'd necessarily win it. I think Boucher and Wood are the top guys in mind when you think of most improved player, but Jeremy Grant definitely has to be in that race, definitely getting some sort of mention or shout out.
For sure.
For the next award, does LaMelo Ball bring some glory back to the Ball family? Is he going to take home Rookie of the Year award? or is there someone else that you have in mind that LeVar might adopt instead?
What do you guys think? Because I don't really have like super strong feelings on any of the rookies. Like my only name, I guess, would be LaMelo, just because like, his passing is just awesome to watch, and it's been a lot of fun, but he's not shooting well or anything. But I don't think there's been that many standouts. Do you guys have any like strong feelings on it?
I think there's a lot of fun rookies this year. That there's, we were calling this draft class a bad class, but there's been a lot of players who are either so far solid role players, solid, bright point players for the future of a team. LaMelo has been fantastic. He's definitely got to be in the conversation. I think Wiseman started off the season really well, and there's been sort of a dip once Draymond returned, and teams sort of figured out, adjusted to figuring him out and planning around him. And I think that he has to sort of now figure out how to counterattack those defenses. But I think that the one player I would give the Rookie of the Year award to would be Tyrese Halliburton of the Kings. He's been a phenomenal player. He hasn't been starting for the team, but neither has LaMelo, but he's been getting valuable minutes, been playing crunch time, closing out games, and been actually helping the Kings win games. He's been doing a little bit of everything. He takes smart shots. He doesn't have that same, mentality starting off as a rookie where he looks a little bit lost out there at times or makes some questionable decisions. A lot of the things he does on offense and on defense has been smart decisions, smart shots, smart passes. the Kings maybe themselves haven't been so good. They've been having some good, fun games, and they're a fun team to watch. I think that a big reason of that is because of Tyrese Halliburton. They've been running 3-guard lineups with Fox, Buddy Hield, and Tyrese Halliburton. A lot of teams have been adopting that strategy since the Thunder started it last year. I don't know if they started it, but they made it famous. And I think that, for me, I would give the Rookie of the Year to Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, I think also one thing that we have to remember this year is that it's really not a normal year for rookies, let alone any other players. Normally, we have the summer league to kind of get to know some of these rookies. ESPN's and all these other basketball platforms are just posting constantly about specific players. But really, these players, they got maybe a month and a half to actually get into game shape with their team. So I think that's also probably one of the reasons why we haven't really focused on a lot of rookies this year. I'd probably give it to LaMelo just for the brand. That's really who's standing out for most people. It would make LeVar even prouder of a father. But he's my pick so far for this year.
Yeah, I'm impressed by both of them. Like Halliburton, like you said, Halliburton's he plays like a veteran. He's just like one of the smartest players on the court all the time. Really good shooter and defender, which basically the two most important skills. And he can also handle the ball, and play out well off those other guards. So I think it's a great choice as well. I was thinking about this because the way it's always portrayed the off season is such a big deal for especially for players coming to new teams and rookies to kind of get acclimated to the pros, and just looking at how rookies did in the NFL this year and now the NBA the first month, it's making me think that all of that stuff is super overrated, because I think the rookies have been way better than in general have been way better than expected. And in the NFL it was a historic amazing rookie class that was just blew away everyone's expectations. So I don't know, it just made me think that the off season, is this all bullshit that that they just tell us, because the rookies have been really fitting in way better than I expected. Yeah.
So actually, since you're our first ever guest on this show, we're going to start a new tradition for our guests. We're just going to wrap up the show. We're going to do a rapid fire questions. No explanations, nothing. We'll just ask you the question. If you one word answer, you don't have to justify yourself. No one's going to come after you and crucify you if you say, an answer that no one likes. So let's take it away. Who's winning the title this year?
Let me say, it's the Lakers.
Who is the greatest of all time? Who's the GOAT?
LeBron.
Which NBA player do you have hope that they could turn their career around?
Does it count RJ Barrett? Is it too soon to say he's been disappointing?
I mean, I don't like the RJ slander, but we'll take it.
No explanation. Your answer. Own it.
I'll go RJ Barrett.
Which player, past or present, would you change the NBA logo to?
Keep it the same.
Who's 2 years away from being 2 years away?
Matt Thomas, because Nick Nurse will never play him.
Which player has the dumbest nickname in the NBA?
The dumbest nickname?
Yeah.
I think I'll say just anyone who just uses initials as if that's a nickname. That's not a nickname. AD is not a nickname. Anyone just using, you can't just use your initials and then call it a nickname. Or someone tried to make DH12 happen for Dwight Howard. That's not a nickname. So stop using initials like a nickname.
All right. You're getting jumped in the middle of the night. Which NBA player do you want to have your back?
James Johnson.
Oh, obviously. We knew that was coming. We knew that one.
Which player would you least want to be a part of your family?
Patrick Beverly.
Okay, NBA games during intermissions. Kiss cam or baby races?
Baby races.
All right. Shout out to Kyrie. Is the earth flat?
No.
All right. Chain mesh or rope mesh for pickup?
Ooh. Gonna go rope mesh. Chain mesh is too hipster.
Shirts or skins for pickup?
I go tank top.
Okay. Final question. Have to get this one right. Winner's ball or loser's ball?
Loser's ball.
Hey.
There we go. He'll get another invite in the future.
Lior, thanks so much for coming on. We had a great time. We appreciate all your insights. Thanks so much for coming.
Everyone, follow him on social media. Lior, what are your handles?
It's just my name at Lior Kozai, Liorkoz, or Z if you're American and listening to this. AI.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on to the show, giving us your hot takes on this crazy NBA season, and we'll be in touch.
All right, appreciate you guys.
Make sure to follow us as well on all social medias at LosersBallPod. We're always posting a ton of NBA content, tweeting, posting on our stories, posting on TikTok. So be sure to give us a follow.
And, we have one listener in Sweden. I'm probably going to butcher this, but Lyckliga Hinkar. Thank you very much. Happy buckets.
Happy buckets.
See you next week.